I used 6 words for the first lie. The bite did not break skin. You asked me when it began, Isran. That was when. Not when my eyes changed. Not when I stopped sleeping. Not when I put my mouth against a living throat and learned how little strength it took to hold a man down. Those came later. The first thing I did was smaller. 6 words in the passage beneath Broken Fang Cave while Kelan held a torch over my shoulder and asked whether the vampire had gotten through the collar of my cuirass. The bite did not break skin. Selan believed me because there was more blood on the vampire than there was on me. He had driven his sword through her ribs before she could take a second mouthful. I remember her weight hanging from my neck. I remember the scrape of her teeth against the steel rim of the gorget. I remember thinking that she had missed the artery by the width of a thumbnail. A soldier counts distances like that. A thumbnail. 2 fingers. Half a pace. Enough to live. Enough to die. I had served with the Dawnguard long enough to know what came after a bad wound. Gunmar checked the limbs. Serene checked the gear if bolts or crossbows had failed. You checked the account. You always checked the account. If a hunter came back from a vampire den with 2 holes in his neck and a weak story, you did not smile and call him lucky. That was why I lied. You can call it cowardice. I did later. At the time I called it efficiency. We still had 2 chambers to clear, 1 hunter bleeding from the thigh, and a nest of vampires deeper in the cave. If I told Selan the truth, he would pull me out of the line. If he pulled me out, he would lose a shield arm. If he lost a shield arm, the next room would cost more people. I had fought long enough to know how men die because one soldier decides his own wound matters more than the formation. So I tightened the strap under my chin and kept moving. That is the part I used to repeat to myself. Kept moving, as though motion could make the decision clean. You were not there at Broken Fang Cave. You had sent us west because travelers had gone missing on the road toward Whiterun, and because the Dragonborn was away on another task. The Dawnguard was still rebuilding itself around us. Soreen Jurard had only recently brought her tools into the fort. Gunmar had his first armored troll penned behind the lower wall. Agmair could hit the broadside of a target most days if the target had the courtesy to stay still. Durak mocked him for it. Belival mocked Durak for mocking him. For a few hours at a time, Fort Dawnguard almost sounded like a garrison instead of a tomb somebody had reopened. You never let it sound that way for long. The vampires were getting bolder. That was what you told us. Castle Volkihar had moved pieces onto the board, and every road mattered. You had already made Serene and Gunmar stand beneath concentrated sunlight before you welcomed them into the fort. I had seen the beam strike the stone floor around their boots. I had seen Gunmar squint into it, and Serene swear under her breath while you told them you were making sure they were not vampires. At the time, I approved. That matters. I approved of you checking them. I approved of the crossbows kept loaded near the gate. I approved when you told us that trust was a luxury paid for with other people's graves. I had seen what vampires did to farmhouses. I had helped clear the Hall of the Vigilant after the attack, after Keeper Carset and the rest were dead. I had dragged a body out by the boots because the hands were burned too badly to grip. I knew why you hated them. I hated them too. Maybe that is why I did not tell Chelan. We finished the cave before dawn. 3 vampires, 2 thralls, 1 hound. Selan took a cut across his forearm. I lost part of the leather at my neck and told every person who asked that a claw had caught it. We burned the bodies outside because you had taught us not to leave useful remains for necromancers. Then we took the road east. By the time Whiterun came into view, I had a headache behind my eyes. I did not think of Sanguinare Vampiris. That sounds absurd now. A Dawnguard hunter bitten in a vampire cave, and he does not think of the disease. I did think of it. I pushed the thought aside because I had been awake for near 2 days. My shoulder was swollen, and the headache behaved like every other headache I had carried home from a fight. At the stables, Selan bought water and bread. I drank half a skin and vomited behind the wall. He asked whether I was sure about my neck. I told him the same 6 words. He stared at me longer that time. No, that is wrong. He did not stare. Selan never wasted motion that way. He checked the strap, checked my pupils, and put 2 fingers against the side of my throat. Then he told me I was burning up. I answered that fever came with wounds. He told me bites came with worse. I laughed. It sounded poor even to me. We could have gone to the temple of Kinnereth. I know. You have reminded me of that 3 times since you chained me to this chair. I know what shrines do for disease. I know potions of cured disease exist. I know I had time then. I also knew Selan would report the bite if we went inside the city and a priest saw it. That was the second compromise, if you want the count. I chose secrecy over the easy cure because I was more afraid of your judgment than I was of the disease. I can see your face. Do not waste the breath telling me you would have sent me for treatment. You did tell me later. That knowledge belongs later. At Whiterun, I bought willow bark, salt, and a potion of healing from Arcadia. I did not ask for a cure disease potion. I remember the bottles on the shelf, green glass, 3 of them. I had enough septims. I bought the wrong potion on purpose. That is the first part I cannot dress as soldier sense. We left Whiterun before noon. I kept my hood up against the light because it made the headache worse. Selan noticed. He made a joke about Nord's finally learning that the sun existed. I told him to save his breath for the climb into the rift. The whole thing went sideways by the second night. I woke under a pine with my teeth aching, not my jaw, my teeth. I had slept through part of Kalan watch, which I had never done in 20 years of sleeping near armed men. He was sitting by the embers with his crossbow across his knees. I saw the pulse in his neck before I saw his face. I am not sure why I am telling you that detail. Maybe because it was the first sign I could not blame on fever. The pulse moved once, twice. I heard it. I heard his blood. Kellan asked why I was awake. I told him I needed to piss. Then I went behind a tree and bit the inside of my own hand until the need passed enough for me to come back. The skin healed before morning. There. You wanted the part where I knew. I knew then. I still did not tell him. By midday, we were in the rift. The light hurt enough that I kept my helmet on with the visor lowered. Selan grew suspicious. He did not accuse me. He changed our route. Instead of taking the straight road for Dayspring Canyon, he led us through trees and stopped at a stream. He knelt to fill his water skin. His sword hand stayed close to the hilt. He asked me to remove the helmet. I told him the sun was giving me trouble. He asked again. I remember thinking that if he drew steel, I could kill him before the blade cleared the scabbard. That thought came with no anger. That frightened me more than the hunger. I removed the helmet. Kellan studied my eyes. I saw him decide. His weight shifted back. I told him I had a fever. He told me fever did not change a man's eyes that way. I asked whether he planned to shoot me. He answered that he planned to get me to you alive. There are men who would hear kindness in that. I heard the word alive and supplied the rest myself. Alive for questioning, alive for the sunlight, alive until Isran was satisfied. That was my own addition. Kellan never threatened me. I hit him anyway. Open hand, left side. Hard enough to drop him, not hard enough to crack the skull. I caught his crossbow before it hit the mud, took the bolts, and dragged him under the trees. He came around in less than a minute. I had already backed 10 paces away. He called me a damn fool. I agreed. He told me to come back. I told him I needed one day. He asked what one day would change. I had no answer, so I left. That is the first hunter I betrayed. Do not count the blow, count the leaving. Selan would have helped me if I had let him. Instead, I left him in the rift with a swelling cheek and an empty crossbow while I ran toward Riften, like every fugitive I had ever tracked. I reached the city after sunset. The guards barely glanced at me because Dawnguard armor still carried weight then. That was another thing I used before I admitted I was using it. The cuirass opened gates. The crossbow made honest men assume I was honest. The sun emblem on my chest bought me rooms, directions, and silence. I slept in the bee and barb for perhaps an hour. Sleep did not help. My body wanted blood. There is no finer word for it. You can give it a curse name, a disease name, a Daedric name if you like. My tongue dried. My hands trembled. Every person downstairs became a set of vessels under skin. I could tell who had been drinking mead because the scent changed. I could tell who was sick. I could tell when Kirava cut her thumb in the kitchen because the smell reached the stairs before she cursed. I left before I did worse. Outside Riften, I found a camp beside the road. 3 bandits. They had a stolen horse tied to a tree and 2 sacks marked with the seal of a merchant from Shore Stone. I knew what they were before they drew weapons. I killed 2. The third ran. I caught him in 30 paces. That should have warned me more than the teeth. I had never been fast. Strong, yes. Hard to move once my feet were planted, yes. Fast belonged to younger men. That night I crossed 30 paces before the bandit reached the ditch. I knocked him down and held a knee between his shoulders. He begged. I had heard men beg before. In the Great War, bandits after, vampires later. Begging is usually noise. You listen for hands and weapons. I listened to his heartbeat. I told myself I would feed without killing him. That sentence became useful. I would feed without killing. I would steal without killing. I would lie without killing. I would strike without killing. Each line gave me a boundary, and every boundary moved the moment I reached it. I pulled his head back by the hair and fed. You know what that does to a man. You have seen the marks. You have seen survivors wake pale and confused after a vampire takes enough to weaken them. I took less than I wanted. That is what I told myself afterward. Less than I wanted. The bandit lived. I tied his wrists and left him near the road where a patrol would find him. Then I sat under a tree until dawn and tried to decide whether I was still a Dawnguard hunter. I never answered. You did. When I returned to Dayspring Canyon the next evening, 2 crossbows were aimed at me before I reached the gate. Durak held one. Belival held the other. Neither fired. Durak told me to stop where I was. I stopped. Belival asked where Kalan was. I told her we had separated near Riften after an argument about the route. She asked why he had arrived 5 hours earlier with a bruise on his face. I had prepared 3 lies on the road. None survived that question. I told her he had tried to stop me from visiting a healer. Durak asked why a healer required taking another hunter ammunition. I told him I had panicked. That part was true. You came through the gate before either of them decided what to do with me. I remember the warhammer in your hand. You were not wearing a helmet. You rarely do inside the canyon. Your face had that flat set it gets when somebody has made your life more complicated than the vampires already have. You ordered Durak to lower the crossbow. He did. You ordered Belival to keep hers up. She did. Then you asked me what happened. I gave you the nearest truth I had. I told you I had been bitten, become sick, panicked, and gone to Riften looking for help. You asked when the bite happened. I told you on the road after that hunt. You knew that was a lie before I finished it. Selan had already told you about the damaged gorget. You asked me to remove my helmet. I refused. The canyon became very still around us. You did not reach for me. That was worse. You gave one order to Belival. Bring Soreen. I understood why. The sunlight apparatus had been repaired enough to test recruits. Soreen knew the focusing pieces. You had used it on her and Gunmar. A vampire could cross Dayspring Canyon under dusk. A vampire could stand 10 paces from you under cloud. Concentrated sunlight was a different matter. I backed away. You told me to stay where I was. I told you I needed a cure. That was the first time I admitted the word. Your face changed by less than a finger width. I knew you well enough to see it. You asked whether I had fed. I lied again. No. One word that time. You asked me twice. I gave you the same answer. Then Bran began barking from behind the lower wall. Maybe the dog smelled blood on me. Maybe he heard the strain in every voice. I do not know. I know I ran when he barked. You shouted my name. Belival fired. The bolt hit my shoulder plate and skipped. I went down, rolled, came up with my own crossbow in hand. Durak could have shot me. He had the line. He did not. I owe him for that, though he will deny it. I put a bolt into the dirt between you and me. Not at you. Between us. Then, I ran back down Dayspring Canyon before Soreen reached the gate. You sent people after me within minutes. Of course you did. You would have been a poor leader if you had not. I spent that night moving south and west, away from every road. I crossed the Treva River where the current reached my waist. I climbed through rock because I knew horses could not follow. I used every lesson the Legion had beaten into me years before. Break sight. Change ground. Never take the easy ridge. Never sleep where a sane man would sleep. I was using soldier craft against the Dawnguard. That bothered me for perhaps an hour. Hunger took the rest. The bandit blood had bought me time. I could pass a farm without hearing every heart inside. The sun still burned my eyes, but dusk felt almost normal. That word is generous. I could think. Thinking made me dangerous. I remembered a rumor from the fort. Gunmar had mentioned Morthal once after a hunt near Yalmarch. A Redguard mage named Falion studied the undead. Gunmar had not praised him. Gunmar did not praise many mages. He had only said that if a man wanted answers about vampires and could tolerate arrogance, Falion knew more than most priests. I had laughed at the time and asked what kind of hunter went to a conjurer for vampire advice. Gunmar had answered, the kind who wanted correct advice. I headed for Morthal. The route took 2 days because I traveled after sunset and hid during the brightest hours. I fed once on a sleeping hunter in a camp north of Iverstead. That one was harder to excuse. He was not a bandit. He had venison hanging from a frame, a hide stretched beside the fire, and an old hunting bow within reach. No stolen goods, no bodies, no excuse waiting for me. I crouched near his bedroll for a long time. Then I told myself that feeding was safer than killing. If I starved, I might lose control near a village. If I took a little from one man in the woods, he would wake weak and live. One harmed man could prevent a dead family. That was how I reframed it. You asked me earlier what I meant by that word. Reframed. I mean, I stopped asking whether the act was right. I asked whether I could arrange the act beside a worse one and make it seem small. I fed. He woke. His hand found the knife under his blanket faster than I expected. He cut my forearm. I struck him once in the chest and heard a rib give. He screamed. I covered his mouth. For a few breaths I considered killing him because a living witness could tell the guards what he had seen. I did not. That fact carried me for days. I left him alive. I kept repeating it. I stole his horse. Morthal was gray under rain when I reached it. I left the horse outside town because the hunter might have described it. My Dawnguard cuirass stayed under a travel cloak. I kept the hood low. The first person I asked about Falion was the innkeeper at the Moorside Inn. She studied me in the way innkeepers study men who want information without ale. I bought a room and a bowl of stew I could barely swallow. Then I asked whether the mage still lived in town. She told me Falion lived near the water and kept strange hours. I asked whether he knew about sicknesses. She asked which sickness. I gave her a name for a fever from Cyrodiil. She did not believe me. People around Morthal already had stories about Falion, strange work, conjuration, travel into the marsh before dawn. Some feared him. Some trusted him because Jarl Idgrod Ravencrone allowed him to remain. I cared about one fact. He was there. I reached his house near dusk. Falion opened the door before I knocked. That still bothers me. He had blue robes, an iron dagger at his belt, and the expression of a man who had already solved the problem I was about to describe. He told me to come inside before I frightened his ward. I asked how he knew. He answered that I carried Dawnguard steel, hid from daylight, and could not stop tracking the vein in his neck. He did not need conjuration to solve that. I nearly laughed. He stepped aside. Agni was in the next room. I saw a child at a table and stopped at the threshold. Falion noticed. He told me that if I could not control myself, I should leave Morthal and die in the marsh. No threat, no raised voice. That was Falion. I told him I wanted a cure. He asked how long I had been infected, whether I had fed, and whether I had taken vampire blood by choice. The questions came fast. I answered all of them except the name of the hunter I had fed upon. I did not know the name, but I would have hidden it if I had. Falion told me a cure was possible. I remember gripping the edge of his table hard enough to make the wood creak. He told me the ritual required a filled black soul gem. I knew enough about soul gems to understand the problem. Black souls come from people. Falion did not soften it. A black soul gem needed a human soul, mer soul, beast race soul, or another mortal soul of that kind. The ritual would exchange what had happened to me for the life contained in the gem. He could perform it at a place in the marsh north of Morthal, at dawn. I asked whether a vampire soul would work. He answered yes. That gave me my next excuse before I had even paid him. I would kill a vampire. A Dawnguard hunter killing a vampire was not a compromise. It was work. Falion sold me an empty black soul gem. I paid more than I liked and did not argue. Then I asked how to fill it. He asked whether I could cast Soul Trap. I told him I could light a campfire with a bad flame spell if the wood was dry and the divines were generous. He rubbed his forehead. For the next hour, a master of conjuration taught a Nord vampire hunter enough of Soul Trap to embarrass both of us. I failed 8 times, 9 perhaps. I lost count after Falion called my technique an insult to the College of Winterhold. On the last attempt, I held the spell long enough for the black gem on the table to answer with a faint pull. Falion told me that would do if I cast at close range and killed the target before the binding faded. I asked how long I had. He answered that with my skill, not long, fair. He also warned me not to return blood-starved and half-mad. He had seen vampires arrive too far gone to follow instructions. He wanted the ritual done with control. I asked why he was helping me. Falion glanced toward the room where Agni sat. He told me he had studied forms of life extension and had considered vampirism himself. He rejected it because his choices would endanger the child under his care. Knowledge had uses. Becoming the subject was not required. I understood the rebuke. I left before midnight. The black soul gem weighed less than a bolt head. It sat heavier than a warhammer in my pocket. There were vampires in Hjalmarch. Every hunter knew that. I did not need to go far. The marsh had old paths, burial places, ruined structures, and enough bad ground to hide a nest. I also knew that if your people had guessed Morthal, they would check Falion first. So I did what I had done since the bite. I chose speed over sense. I followed signs of feeding west of town, a dead goat, tracks that avoided the road, a patch of ground where 2 people had waited under alder branches while travelers passed. The signs were poor, but they were enough. Near midnight, I found a woman feeding on a mud crab hunter beside a shallow pool. The hunter was dead. The vampire saw me before I raised the crossbow. She smiled. You know the smile. The one they use when they think they have found a lost cousin. She called me brother. I put a bolt through her shoulder. She came at me anyway. We fought knee-deep in marsh water. She used vampiric drain. I felt the pull in my chest and answered with the same cursed force without thinking. That was the first time I used it against another creature. I hated how natural it came. My crossbow went into the water. I drew the Dawnguard axe at my belt. She caught my wrist. I head-butted her. She laughed blood into my face. I needed Soul Trap before the kill. That was the problem. A veteran fights to end the threat. Falion had made the sequence different. Cast, hold, kill. I stepped back, raised my left hand and tried the spell. Blue light gathered around my fingers, weak and unstable. She hit me before it reached her. The spell failed. I tried again. She tore the cloak from my shoulders and saw the Dawnguard cuirass. Her expression changed. She called me a pet wearing the master's collar. I buried the axe in her side. Too early. She dropped. The gem remained empty. I knelt over her body and screamed into the mud. That was not my finest hour. The dead hunter had a wife. I learned that because a little wooden token in his pouch carried 2 initials carved around a heart. I left his body where the Morthal guard would find it and carried the vampire deeper into the reeds. I told myself I was hiding her corpse so your trackers would not know where I had gone. Truth was uglier. I was angry at a dead vampire because she had died before I could use her soul. Read that line back to yourself if you need to understand where my head had gone. I returned to Falion house before dawn. He opened the door, saw the empty gem, and asked what had happened. I told him the timing failed. He asked whether anybody died. I told him a hunter was already dead when I arrived. He asked whether anybody else died. I told him the vampire. He accepted that answer because it was true. I did not mention that I had begun thinking of the black gem before I thought of the dead man's wife. Falion told me to rest through the day. I asked whether he had another method. He answered no. I asked whether an animal soul could be forced into the gem. He answered no. I asked whether he could fill it. That was the first time he became angry. He told me he would perform a cure, not provide a murder. I told him I was not asking him to murder anyone. He asked what I thought I was asking. I had no good answer. I left. Your people reached Morthal that afternoon. Serene came first. I saw her from the loft of an abandoned shed near the lumber mill. She rode into town with 2 Dawnguard hunters I did not know well. One wore a steel helmet with a dent above the brow. The other had the red scarf some of the newer recruits liked under the armor collar. Serene did not search like a soldier. She talked. That made her more dangerous. She spoke with the innkeeper. She spoke with the guards. She went to Falion house and stayed inside for nearly half an hour. When she came out, she held the empty leather pouch that had carried my payment for the soul gem. I do not know why Falion gave it to her. Maybe he did not. Maybe she saw it on the table. Serene notices pieces other people miss. That is why her crossbows work. I knew I had to move. The sun was still high enough to hurt. I moved anyway. By the time I reached the marsh, my skin burned where the hood did not cover it. The pain was not fire. More like standing too near a forge with no place to step back, except the heat came from every direction. I kept low among reeds and used water when I could. I heard Serene behind me before I reached the northern stones. She called my name. I kept going. She called again and told the others to stay back. That was like her. She thought distance and conversation could fix what weapons made worse. I stopped beneath a dead tree where shade covered half the ground. Serene approached alone. She carried a crossbow, but kept it pointed down. She asked whether I had found Falion. I told her yes. She asked whether he could cure me. I told her yes. She asked why I was running. I told her you would kill me. Serene made a face as if I had given her a bad measurement. She told me that if you wanted me dead, you would have sent Durak instead of her. I almost believed her. Then she asked to see my hands. I knew what she wanted. Tremor, blood under the nails, signs I had fed. I showed her. The cut from the hunter knife had healed completely. Serene saw that too. She asked whom I had fed on. I told her a bandit. That was one truth and one omission. She asked whether the bandit lived. I told her yes. She asked whether there had been anyone else. I hesitated. That was enough. Serene raised the crossbow a few inches. I told her the second man lived too. She asked where he was. I told her north of Ivarstead. She told me one of your patrols had found a hunter there with cracked ribs and vampire marks on his neck. There are moments when a campaign changes because a scout brings one sentence into a tent. That was one. The hunt had reached me before I knew it. Serene told me to return to Fort Dawnguard. She told me Falion had confirmed the cure. She told me you had ordered that I be brought back alive. I asked what happened after the cure. She did not answer fast enough. I laughed. She told me I would answer for striking Kalan and feeding on civilians. There it was. Not death. consequence. At the time, I could not tell the difference. I told her I needed one vampire and one Dawn. She told me the Dawnguard could provide both the target and the escort. I asked whether you would trust me near a bound vampire. She answered that trust had little to do with chains. That sounded like you. I should have gone with her. I know. Instead, I asked where the other two hunters were. Sorene's eyes narrowed. I moved first. I threw mud into her face, crossed the distance, and struck the crossbow aside. She tried to knee me. I caught her coat, spun her, and put her against the tree with my forearm across her shoulders. I could hear her heart. I did not feed. You see how I keep counting that as virtue. I took her bolt case and cut the string on her crossbow. Then I shoved her away and ran. She shouted that I was making it worse. I answered that I knew. I did know. That did not stop me. By sunset, every road out of Yalmarch had eyes on it. I could not reach another known vampire den without crossing a patrol line. Your hunters knew where vampires lived because I had helped mark the maps. Every safe route I could imagine was one the Dawnguard had trained to cover. So I used the places we ignored. Bandit camps, poacher shelters, ruined watchtowers where criminals slept because vampire hunters had no reason to search them. I told myself I was looking for information. I was also looking for blood. 2 nights passed. I fed once. A bandit woman in a ruined tower near Labyrinthian. She had tried to rob me on the road. I disarmed her and tied her hands. Then I waited until she stopped struggling. She asked whether I was going to kill her. I told her no. She asked why my eyes were wrong. I told her to close hers. She did not. I fed anyway. When I finished, she sagged against the wall and whispered that I was worse than the vampires because at least they did not wear a holy symbol while feeding. I hit her. Once. Not because she threatened me. Because she was right. And I did not want to hear it. That is the first act I cannot attach to survival. She lived. I left food, water, and a knife within reach of her bound hands. I cut the rope almost through so she could work free after I was gone. I remember arranging those things with great care. Bread on the left, water on the right, knife near the heel. As if neatness changed what I had done. I was near Labyrinthian by then, which meant Morthal lay only a few hours north. I could have returned to Falion. The gem was still empty. I needed a soul. I considered going farther west toward vampire sites in Hafengar. Too far, east toward the Pale. Too exposed. South would pull me toward Whiterun roads and more patrols. The map in my head kept shrinking. Then I remembered a prisoner. That is the part you keep asking about. The man at the old Imperial watchpost. I did not know his name when I went there. Weeks earlier, a Dawnguard patrol had found a roadside camp stripped of bodies. We suspected a vampire, but the tracks led to a group of bandits using an abandoned watchpost south of Morthal. The bandits were not vampires. They were thieves and killers. One had escaped after stabbing a merchant guard. I had remembered the watchpost because the Dawnguard left the bandits to the hold guards. I told myself the place might contain criminals again. I told myself a criminal soul could fill the gem. You hear the order of those thoughts. I did not go there to find a vampire. I went there hoping to find a person I could decide deserved less life than I did. That was the real version. At the watchpost, I found one man tied to a chair. 3 dead bandits lay outside. The prisoner wore plain wool, no armor. Blood had dried under his nose. One eye was swollen. His hands were tied behind the chair with rope. I entered through the back because I expected an ambush. He heard me and began calling for help. I almost left. Then I saw the black soul gem in my own hand. The prisoner told me the bandits had taken him from the road. He was a courier headed toward Dawnstar. He had hidden under the chair when fighting broke out outside. Somebody else had killed the bandits and gone. I asked who. He did not know. I checked the bodies. Crossbow bolts. Dawnguard bolts. Your hunters had been there. That meant they would return. I cut the prisoner free. That should have been the end. He rubbed his wrists, thanked me, and asked whether I was with the Dawnguard. I told him yes. He smiled with relief. Then he saw my eyes. The smile vanished. I told him I was sick. He backed toward the door. I told him Falion could cure me. He kept backing. I told him I needed him to stay in the watchpost until night. He ran. I caught him outside. He screamed for the hunters. I tackled him into the grass. He clawed at my face. I pinned both wrists with one hand. I could hear horses far down the road. I did not know whether they were yours. That is important because I used them as if I knew. I told the courier to stop fighting. He shouted that I was a vampire. I told him I was trying to cure it. He shouted louder. I put my hand over his mouth. The black soul gem pressed against my palm. There was time to let him go. That sentence is the one I have replayed most. There was time. The road curved through trees. He would have needed near a minute to reach it. I could have run the other direction. I could have dropped the gem into the grass and kept moving. I could have surrendered to the riders if they were Dawnguard. I had choices. I chose the one that solved two problems at once. I cast Soul Trap. The spell caught him. He knew. I saw it in his face. He tried to bite my hand. I drew the axe. One strike. The black soul gem filled. You asked whether he begged? No. He cursed me. I prefer that. Do not mistake me. I am not saying it makes the killing better. I am saying I prefer remembering anger to remembering fear. The riders passed on the road without coming to the watchpost. They were merchants. I killed him for a threat that had never existed. I sat beside the body until the sun touched the tops of the trees. The gem pulsed in my hand with stored magicka and a life that had belonged to a man whose name I still did not know. I could have buried him. I did not have time. That was what I told myself. I dragged him inside, put him back in the chair, and arranged one dead bandit near the door so the scene might pass for bandit violence. Then I took the Dawnguard bolts from the other bodies. Evidence. That word came easily. I was thinking like a hunter again, only I was hunting the truth of my own actions and trying to kill it before anyone else found it. I reached Morthal before dawn. Falion knew the gem was filled before I took it from my pouch. He stared at me for a long time. He asked whose soul it held. I told him a bandit. He asked whether I was sure. I told him yes. That was the worst lie, because I used it to make another man part of the act. Falion took the gem. His face gave me no sign that he believed me. He told me to meet him at the ritual site north of town at dawn. I asked why we could not go immediately. He answered that the ritual was bound to the hour and place he used. He had his method. I had already ignored enough instructions. Fair again. We left separately. The marsh before dawn can hide an army if the army is willing to get wet. Mist lay low over the water. Mud pulled at my boots. The stones of the ritual site rose from the reeds like dark teeth. Falion arrived first. I came from the east. He placed the filled black soul gem where he needed it and told me to stand within the circle. I did. For the first time since the cave, I was one sunrise away from being human. I should stop there for a moment because you keep treating what happened next as if I had already decided to run. I had not. I wanted the cure. I wanted bread to taste like bread again. I wanted to sleep beside armed men without hearing the blood in their throats. I wanted to stand under serene sunlight beam and complain about the heat. I wanted Bran to stop barking at me. I wanted Selin to hit me back once and call the debt paid. I wanted all of it. Falion began the ritual. Then I heard a crossbow ratchet behind the reeds. One click. Another. Dawnguard. You stepped into view with Gunmar on your right and Selan on your left. Selan's cheek had gone yellow where I hit him. Gunmar carried a crossbow. You carried the warhammer. Falion stopped speaking. I asked whether you had come to kill me. You told me to stay in the circle. I asked again. You told me the cure came first. I should have heard the words. I heard the crossbows. You told Gunmar to lower his weapon. He lowered it. Selan did not. You told him to. He lowered it slower. Then you told me that Serene had found the courier at the watchpost. There are sentences that remove every exit from a room. That was one. I glanced at Falion. He knew. He did not need conjuration for that either. You told me the courier had carried papers with his name and route. You told me Serene had found my boot marks, the marks from dragging the body and blood that did not belong to the bandits. You told me Selan had found the missing Dawnguard bolts in my pack, where I had been fool enough to keep them. I had kept them because they were useful. That is almost funny. You told me to finish the ritual. Then I would come back to Fort Dawnguard in chains. I asked what sentence waited for me. You told me that was not my concern yet. There was the Isran I knew. No comfort, no promise. Cure first, judgment after. Falion told me to face him. I did. He lifted his hands. The eastern sky brightened behind the trees. I remembered the exact moment I decided. It was not when Selan shifted his feet. No, that is not right. I promised I would not use that kind of excuse again. I decided when I imagined the cure taking the strength from my limbs. That is the truth. I had spent days learning what the curse gave me. Speed, healing, night sight, the ability to pull life through vampiric drain. I hated every gift until I stood inside a ring surrounded by men who planned to chain me. Then I wanted those gifts. I chose them. I kicked the black soul gem out of the ritual place. Falion shouted. Gunmar raised his crossbow. I used vampiric drain on him. He dropped to one knee, more shocked than wounded. Selan fired. The bolt went through my side. I ran at him. You moved between us. Your warhammer caught me across the ribs and threw me into the mud. I remember the sound more than the pain. I tried to rise. You told me to stay down. For one breath I nearly obeyed. Then the first edge of sunlight touched the marsh. My skin began to burn. I crawled for the reeds. Selan reached for me. I bit him. There. You wanted that part too. I bit a Dawnguard hunter who had tried to save me twice. I tasted his blood and did not stop at once. You pulled me off him by the back of the cuirass. Gunmar hit me with the stock of his crossbow. Falion shouted that the ritual could still be completed if I stopped fighting. I heard him. I heard every word. I threw mud into your eyes and ran. The gem remained behind. The cure remained behind. Falion remained behind. I ran north into the marsh while the sun climbed. That was the point of no return. At the time I called it escape. For 3 days I hid in Yalmarch. You sealed the roads. Gunmar tracked me through the marsh. Serene sent word to guards from Morthal to Dawnstar. Selan survived the bite and took a potion before the disease could set. I learned that later. At the time I assumed I had damned him too. That assumption should have made me surrender. Instead, it made me avoid him. I found an old cellar under the remains of a burned farmhouse and slept there through daylight. At night, I hunted animals first. Their blood did not answer the hunger. I tried anyway. Deer, a wolf. It did little. The 4th night, I fed on a traveler. He lived. The 5th night, I fed on another. She lived too. I stopped telling myself that fact after the 6th. The 6th was a guard outside Morthal. He recognized the Dawnguard armor under my cloak and called my name. I could have fled. I used vampiric drain until he dropped. He was still breathing when I left. I do not know whether he survived. No, I know now. You told me. He did. Good. I am allowed to be glad about one thing without pretending it erases the rest. You kept asking why I did not leave Skyrim. Where would I go? East into Morrowind, where the sun still rises. South into Cyrodiil, with Legion checkpoints on the roads. West toward High Rock, with Dawnguard messages ahead of me. North into the Sea of Ghosts, and die in a boat. I knew Skyrim. More important, I knew the Dawnguard. I knew how you searched. That became my advantage. You taught us to think like vampires. Avoid obvious shelters. Watch roads from above. Use thralls where hunters expected masters. Force the hunter to choose between protecting civilians and keeping pursuit. I had listened well. That is where the story stops being about a sick hunter trying to reach Falion. I began setting false trails. I stole boots from a dead bandit and left prints west while I moved east. I fed near a road, then doubled back through water. I let a farmer see the edge of my Dawnguard cuirass near Stonehills so the report would reach you. While your hunters searched Hjalmarch, I crossed into the Pale. I used the uniform because people trusted it. That sentence still tastes worse than blood. Near Dawnstar, I met a woman with a wagon axle cracked in a rut. Her son was trying to lift the wheel. They saw the sun emblem and asked for help. I helped. For half an hour, I was Hrofdir again. I cut a brace from pine. I used a strap from my pack. I showed the boy how to wedge the axle without putting his fingers under the weight. The woman offered me bread. I could not eat it. She asked whether I was hurt. I told her yes. The boy asked whether vampires had done it. I told him yes. He asked whether I killed them. I told him some. That was close enough to truth that it hurt. I left before sunset because I could hear both heartbeats too clearly. I made it half a mile. Then I went back. You asked whether I fed on the woman or the boy. Neither. I am not saying that to earn mercy. I went back because I had seen riders on the ridge and thought they might be Dawnguard. I meant to warn the family away from the road so they would not be caught between us. The riders were bandits, 4 of them. They surrounded the wagon. I killed all 4. The woman saw me move. She saw one bandit strike my face with a mace and saw the wound close while I fought the next man. She saw me use vampiric drain on the last. When it was over, she pulled her son behind her and held a knife with both hands. She thanked me. Then she asked me to leave. I did. That night I fed on one of the dead bandits before the bodies cooled. You are shaking your head because vampires do not feed that way. You are right. I tried. It did not work. That detail should embarrass me more than it does. I was desperate enough to put my teeth into a corpse and angry when the dead body could not give me what I needed. So I found the bandit camp. There were 2 people left there. One was injured. One slept. I fed on the sleeper. The injured man woke and attacked. I killed him. No soul trap, no ritual, no excuse about a cure. He swung an axe at me and I killed him because that is what men do in a fight. I wish the killing had disturbed me more. It did not. That frightened me for perhaps 10 minutes. Then I searched his pack for septims. The next week became a campaign. You had patrols moving from Fort Dawnguard through the Rift, Whiterun, Hjalmarch, and the Pale. I heard that Isran had placed my description with hold guards, vampire, Nord, Dawnguard armor possibly stolen, armed with crossbow and axe, dangerous, possibly stolen. That almost made me laugh. The armor was mine. I had earned it by killing vampires beside you. I kept thinking that ownership mattered. I slept in caves, ruins, abandoned mines, and once under a bridge with 3 feet of stone between me and sunrise. I learned which inns had cellar doors. I learned that stable lofts were safer than rooms because stable hands rose before dawn and innkeepers asked questions. I learned to feed without waking people. That is not a skill I am proud of. I became good at it. A hand over the mouth before the teeth. Weight across the shoulders, not the chest. Take enough to dull the hunger and stop before the pulse weakens too far. Leave them on their side if they vomit. Put water within reach. Listen to me. I am giving instructions. That is how deep it went. I began measuring people by risk. Bandits were easiest. Travelers alone were manageable. Guards were dangerous because patrols counted them. Farmers created witnesses. Children were forbidden. You can write that down if you like. I had rules. Every monster has rules if he wants to sleep during the day. No. Strike that. That sounded too polished. I had lines because lines let me pretend I was still choosing restraint. One of those lines was never feed inside a home. I crossed it outside Winterhold. A storm pinned me against the coast for a full day. Cloud cover kept the sun off me, but wind drove snow hard enough to hide the road. I had gone too long without feeding. My hands would not stop shaking. My vision narrowed every time I smelled blood. I found a fishing hut near the water. An old man lived there alone. He let me inside because he saw Dawnguard armor. There is the uniform again. He gave me a place near the fire. He poured me mead. I pretended to drink. He told me vampires had been seen near the road south and asked whether that was why I had come. I told him yes. He told me about his daughter in Windhelm. He had not seen her since the previous winter. He was saving septims to travel when the roads improved. I remember the exact number in the jar above his hearth. 83. He went to sleep in the next room. I sat by the fire until the wood collapsed into red coals. Then I entered his room and fed. He woke halfway through. He knew what I was. He did not fight. He asked me not to kill him. I told him I would not. I meant it. I stopped before he died. Then he whispered that I should take the 83 septims and leave because he did not want me there when his neighbors arrived. I did not take the septims. For years I used that as proof that some part of me remained decent. 83 septims left in a jar. Pathetic standard. I left before dawn. 2 days later, a Dawnguard patrol found the old man. He survived. Word reached you. The description matched me. You tightened the search. Gunmar nearly caught me near Yorgrim Overlook. He had Bran with him. I heard the dog before I saw Gunmar. I climbed into rocks above the path and waited with my crossbow ready. Bran came around the bend first, nose low, then Gunmar behind with another hunter. I had a clear shot, 30 yards. Gunmar chest filled the sight. I could have killed him. I did not. He stopped beneath the rocks and spoke without looking up. He told me that he knew I was there. I kept the crossbow aimed. He told me Bran had been tracking me for 6 miles and had never been wrong about a trail in his life. I almost called down that Bran was a dog and did not understand betrayal. I kept my mouth shut. Gunmar told the other hunter to take Bran farther down the path. The man objected. Gunmar repeated the order. They left. Then Gunmar sat on a rock beneath me and took off one glove. He told me Falion still had the black soul gem. That hit harder than a threat. I lowered the crossbow a little. Gunmar told me the cure remained possible. I asked what you had promised him. He answered that you promised nothing. Of course. He told me Selan wanted to speak with me. I asked whether Selan wanted his teeth back. Gunmar told me Selan wanted to tell me he was cured before the disease took hold. I laughed once. It came out wrong. Gunmar asked whether I had killed the courier. I told him yes. He asked whether the courier had attacked me. I told him no. He asked whether the courier had been a vampire thrall. I told him no. He nodded. That was all. No sermon. Gunmar has always been cruel that way. He lets facts stand on their own feet. I asked what would happen if I surrendered. He told me I would be cured if Falion could still do it, chained while necessary, and judged for the deaths and assaults afterward. I asked whether you would execute me. Gunmar answered that he did not know. I believed him. He told me to set the crossbow down and come with him. I almost did. This is one of those places where I lose the thread. I remember his glove on the stone. I remember a hawk passing over the ridge. I remember thinking that if I came down, Bran would smell the blood on my clothes. That makes no sense. They already knew what I was. I think I needed one more reason to remain afraid, so I made one. I told Gunmar I needed a night to think. He told me I had already spent too many nights thinking. Then I backed away from the ridge and ran. He did not shoot. That mercy cost people. I reached Eastmarch by dawn. Windhelm was too dangerous, so I stayed outside the walls and followed the river south. I had heard rumors of vampire movement near caves along the roads, and I still carried the idea that killing vampires made me different from them. I found a nest 3 nights later. 2 vampires, 4 thralls. I killed one vampire before she rose from a chair. The second recognized what I was and tried to bargain. He told me the Dawnguard would never take me back. I told him to shut his mouth. He offered shelter, blood, a place among his kind. I shot him through the leg. He laughed and told me I already fed like them, slept like them, killed like them, and fled the sun like them. I hit him with the crossbow stock until he stopped laughing. Then I killed him. The thralls were worse. 2 attacked. 1 hid. 1 knelt and begged me to free her. I knew enough about vampire thralls to know that not all chains are iron. Some people in those dens are compelled, terrified, addicted, or too damaged to understand where to go. I cut the kneeling woman loose. The hiding man came at me with a knife. I broke his wrist. He spat in my face and called me master. I killed him. Too fast. That one stayed with me. The freed woman ran. I let her. I spent the day in the nest because sunlight blocked the exit. There were bottles of blood on a shelf. Potions of blood. I had taken them from dead vampires before and handed them to Serene for disposal or study. I knew what they were. I drank one. The hunger eased without a victim beneath my hands. That should have been relief. Instead, I remember anger. All those nights, all those people. There had been another way to survive between feedings if I had found the right supplies. I broke the empty bottle against the wall. Then I drank a second. By the next night, I had made a decision. I would hunt vampires for their blood and avoid feeding on civilians. You can hear the old Dawnguard logic in that. Hunt the nest. Take what I need. Harm fewer people. For nearly 2 weeks it worked. I cleared small dens before your patrols reached them. I killed vampires who would have killed travelers. I took their potions of blood. I left signs where guards could find the bodies. People began telling stories about a Dawnguard hunter working alone. That was dangerous, but I liked hearing it. I wanted to be the hero in the story again. I even sent 1 unsigned note to Fort Dawnguard with the location of a nest near Riften. Serene recognized my handwriting. Of course she did. 3 nights later, you set a trap using a false report about vampires in a mine south of Windhelm. I took the bait. You knew I would. The mine entrance had blood on the stones. A dead goat. Tracks. Good work, by the way. Gunmar, I assume. I entered before midnight. The first chamber was empty. The second held 2 potions of blood on a crate. I remember thinking the vampires had become careless. Then the gate dropped behind me. Serene voice came from the passage above. She told me not to move. I picked up 1 bottle anyway. She told me it was filled with goat blood and red dye. I set it down. That was almost funny too. You stepped into view behind the bars with Kalan and Durak. Chelan had a scar at his neck where I bit him. I could not stop staring at it. He noticed. He told me the potion worked. No vampirism, no curse. I told him I was glad. He told me to prove it by surrendering. You stayed behind him, silent. I asked whether Falion would still perform the ritual. You answered yes. I asked what sentence waited after. You told me again that cure came first. I became angry, not because you threatened me, because you would not. I had spent weeks building you into an executioner in my head. Every crime needed that version of you. If you intended to kill me from the first bite, then every lie became survival. Every assault became escape. Every victim became part of the cost you had forced on me. You refused to play the part. You told me to put down the axe. I told you to promise I would live. You refused. I told you that proved me right. You answered that it proved you did not lie to frighten men to make them easier to chain. That line made me want to kill you. I am not proud of that either. I used vampiric drain through the bars on the mechanism guard above the gate. He fell. The gate chain slipped. I caught the bars as they rose and forced my way beneath. Durak fired. The bolt struck my thigh. Selan came forward with a shield. I hit him hard enough to send him into the wall. You came next. I did not fight you. I ran deeper into the mine. That was your mistake. You had chosen a mine with another exit because you wanted me to have a path that did not require charging through the Dawnguard. You were trying to prevent deaths. I used the path. Outside, dawn was near. I reached a stream, followed it east, and disappeared into the hills. After that trap, I stopped sending warnings about vampire nests. That punished travelers, not you. I knew it. I did it anyway. That is escalation. You wanted the word. There it is. Each time the Dawnguard closed a door, I took from somebody else to build another. I began stealing horses. I robbed a healer for potions of healing because merchants in towns recognized me. I threatened a farmer who caught me sleeping in his cellar. I bound 2 guards and left them in a shed. I broke a merchant's jaw because he tried to pull my hood back. The crime spread outward from the original secret like cracks in ice. That metaphor is poor. Leave it. You asked for the account I can give, not one polished by a bard. I crossed the reach and came back east. I went near Markarth once, decided the city gates were too dangerous, and slept in a forsworn ruin after its occupants had moved on. I spent 3 days there with no blood and began talking to myself. I argued with you. You were not there. I argued with Selan too. He won more often. I began hearing the courier curse me when I tried to sleep. That was memory, not magic. I know the difference. At least I think I do. When I finally fed again, I chose a mercenary on the road because he had a sword, and I told myself armed men accepted risk. He nearly killed me. We fought under a stone bridge. His blade cut my belly. I broke his knee. He dropped the sword and asked for quarter. I fed on him after he surrendered. He lived. I left him with his sword. Again, the count. Again, the little proof. You can see the pattern before I could. I measured myself against death because anything short of death could be called restraint. By the time I returned to the rift, Fort Dawnguard had changed patrol schedules twice because of me. That information reached me through frightened people in taverns. Hunters spoke about me openly now. Hrolfdir the Turned, Hrolfdir the Bloodcoat. I do not know who invented that second name. It is terrible. Durak probably laughed. I hated hearing my name beside vampire. So I made another decision. I would go back to Falion alone and take the cure before you could stop me. Yes. After all of it, I still wanted the cure. That is the ugly part of dissent people do not like in stories. They expect the man to choose one road and become one thing. I wanted both. I wanted to keep every crime that had protected me and still arrive at the end as the man I had been before them. I wanted Falion to erase the condition and leave the choices untouched. I reached Morthal on a moonless night. Falion had expected me for weeks. He opened his door and told me I smelled worse than the last time. I laughed. He did not. Agni was asleep. I stayed near the door. Falion asked why I had returned. I told him I wanted the ritual. He asked whether I wanted it enough to surrender afterward. I asked who had been talking to him. He answered that every god in Yalmach had been talking about me. I told him I had not killed any of them. He asked about the courier. I had no reply. Falion told me the soul in the black gem remained bound. I asked whether he still had it. He did. He had not used it. He had not destroyed it. He had kept the gem because he believed I might return. That kindness nearly undid me. I asked why. He told me that curing a vampire and forgiving a killer were separate tasks. He could do the first. The second did not belong to him. I told him I would meet him at dawn. He asked whether Isran knew. I told him no. Falion told me he would send word. I drew my axe. Not fully. Halfway. His eyes dropped to the blade. I told him not to. He told me to remove my hand from the weapon. I did, slowly. Then he told me that if I wanted his help, I would accept his conditions. He would not hide me from the Dawnguard. He would not lie to Jarl Idgrod Ravencrone. He would perform the ritual at dawn if I arrived unarmed and alone. I asked whether he feared me. He answered yes. That surprised me. Falion had never behaved afraid. He told me fear did not require obedience. I left the axe on his table. I left the crossbow too. At dawn I went to the stones with no weapon. Falion was there. So were you. Of course, this time you brought no line of hunters. Only Kalan. He remained 50 paces away. You came into the ritual place alone. You wore Dawnguard armor and carried the warhammer, but the head stayed down. I asked whether you could ever meet a vampire without bringing the hammer. You answered that I had taught you not to. Fair. Falion placed the gem. I entered the circle. You stayed outside. I asked for your word that I would reach Fort Dawnguard alive. You gave it. I asked for your word that I would leave alive. You refused. Of course. I nearly ran again. Falion told me to stay still. I stayed. He began the ritual. The black gem darkened in the first light. I remember pressure in my chest, heat behind the eyes, a pull like a hook beneath the ribs. My knees weakened. Then a bolt struck the stone beside Falion. Not from Kalan, from the reeds. A vampire rose out of the mist with 3 others behind him. They had followed me. Maybe from Morthal. Maybe for days. I never learned. The first one shouted that I belonged to them. The second fired at Falion again. You moved before I did. You put yourself between the bolt and the mage. The bolt hit your shoulder plate. Selan fired from the ridge. 1 vampire dropped. Falion shouted for me to remain in the circle. I tried. I truly tried. The 3rd vampire reached the stones and used vampiric drain on Falion. I left the circle. I tackled him. The ritual broke. Again. We went into the mud together. He clawed my face. I struck him with my fists because my weapons were back at Falion House. You crushed another with the warhammer. Selan fired until his crossbow clicked empty. The last vampire ran. I chased him. You shouted for me to stop. I did not. I caught the vampire near the water and killed him with a stone. When I returned, Falion was staring at the black soul gem. A crack ran through it. The interruption had damaged the binding. The soul was still there, he told me, but unstable. The ritual could not simply begin again. He would need time to prepare another attempt, perhaps another gem, if the first failed. I laughed until I could not breathe. You thought I was crying. I was not. Not at first. Then I was. I had surrendered twice to that circle and left twice as a vampire. The first failure belonged to me. The second did not. That distinction became poison. I decided the divines had made their judgment. I know. That sounds like a philosophy from a drunk priest. I did not think it that neatly. I thought, enough. I thought, I tried. I thought, every time I get close, somebody puts a bolt through it. You told me we would take the gem back to Falion House and try again. I told you no. You ordered me. I told you no again. Selan raised his crossbow even though it was empty. I smiled at him. Then I ran. You did not chase immediately because Falion was hurt. I knew you would choose him. I used that knowledge against you. That was the last time I tried to be cured. From there, I can make the account shorter. You already know most of it from reports. I went south. I robbed a caravan for potions of blood that I believed a vampire agent was moving. I was wrong about the cargo and took food I could not eat. 2 potions of healing and 140 septums. I left the merchants tied near the road. I broke into an alchemist's cellar in Riften and found no potions of blood. I fed on the owner when he came downstairs with a club. He survived. I attacked a vampire near Shore Stone and killed him. I took 3 bottles from his pack. That bought me days. I killed a Dawnguard recruit near the road to Stendar Beacon. There. That is the one you were waiting for. I did not know his name. You told me it was Ostar. Nord. Young. Joined after I fled. He recognized me from the notices. He aimed his crossbow and ordered me to kneel. I told him I had served the Dawnguard before he knew how to load that weapon. He told me that did not matter. He was right. I tried to move around him. He fired. The bolt hit my upper arm. I rushed him. He drew a sword. We fought. I could have disarmed him. I was stronger. I killed him anyway. Afterward, I found a letter in his pack from his mother in Rorikstead. I did not read the whole thing. I could not. I buried him. That was when I stopped wearing the Dawnguard cuirass. Not because I felt unworthy. No, that is too generous. I stopped because the armor had become dangerous. Hunters recognized it. Guards recognized it. The symbol that had once opened gates now closed them. Practical reason. I left the cuirass under stones near the road and kept the boots because they fit. That detail is worse than any speech I could give you. I kept the boots. Weeks passed. I lost count of feedings. I kept count of deaths. 5 by my hand after the courier. 2 vampires. 2 bandits. Ostar. Maybe the injured man in the bandit camp makes 6 if he died from the wound later. I do not know. You tell me the guard survived. You tell me the mercenary survived. You tell me the old fisherman lived. I am glad. I mean that. I also know I would have used their survival to excuse myself if you had caught me earlier. By the time you found me near Riften, I had become careful enough that ordinary guards could not keep up. I slept below ground. I carried stolen clothes. I never entered a village twice. I fed from people who traveled alone and moved before dawn. I had become exactly the kind of target I used to hunt. You did not catch me by tracking. You caught me with Kellan. He sat alone beside the road in plain clothes with a campfire and a bottle of mead. No visible crossbow. No Dawnguard armor. No horse. He knew I would recognize him. I did. I stayed in the trees for perhaps 10 minutes. He poured a second cup and set it on a stone. Then he called my name. I came out. That was foolish. Maybe I was tired. No, I was tired, but that is not enough. I wanted to see whether he hated me. He had every right. Selan asked whether I wanted the mead. I told him it would taste like mud. He drank both cups. We sat across the fire from each other. He asked whether I remembered the cave where I was bitten. I told him every room. He asked whether the bite broke skin. I laughed. There it was again. 6 words waiting between us after all those weeks. I told him yes. He asked why I lied. I gave him the old answer about the formation and the remaining chambers. He let me finish. Then he asked why I lied at Whiterun when the cave was already behind us. I had no military answer for that. I told him I was afraid. Selan nodded. He asked whether I was afraid now. I told him yes. He asked of what. I answered the chain. He told me the chain was already there whether I surrendered or not. I asked whether you had taught him that line. He told me no. We sat for a while. Then Selan pulled back the collar of his shirt and showed me the scar from my bite. He told me he had taken the cure disease potion within hours. He told me he had spent the next 3 nights waiting to see whether I had given him the curse anyway. He had not slept. I apologized. The words sounded thin. Selan asked whether I wanted to stop. I told him I did not know how. He pointed toward the dark road behind him. You were there with Gunmar, Durak, Sorin, and 6 hunters. Crossbows ready. I could have killed Selan before they reached me. I did not. I could have run. I tried. Sorin had placed caltrops across the path I chose. One went through my boot. The good boot. The one from the Dawnguard armor. I fell. Gunmar reached me first. I used vampiric drain on him. He hit me with a shield. Durak put a bolt through my calf. I crawled 3 paces. You came over the rise with the warhammer. I remember thinking that you had finally become the executioner I invented. You hit me in the shoulder instead of the skull. I woke here. Fort Dawnguard. The same stone walls. The same smell of oil, steel, dogs, and old dust. Chains on both wrists. Iron around the ankles. A shutter over the high opening, so sunlight cannot reach me unless you order it opened. You gave me water I do not need much. You gave me blood from a bottle because you wanted me lucid for the account. That is almost kind. Do not glare. I said almost. You asked for the truth from the first bite to the road near Riften. That is the truth I can give. I left parts out at first. You caught them. I changed the order twice. Sorin notes forced me back. Selan memory corrected mine. Gunmar supplied the name of the old fisherman. Falion sent a letter confirming the ritual and the courier soul. You have the whole line now. 6 words. A mist cure in Whiterun. A blow to Selan. A bandit throat. A hunter's blood. Falion. The black soul gem. The courier. The first ritual. The escape. The old man. Gonmar on the ridge. The mine. The second ritual. Ostar. Selan by the road. Each step close enough to the last that I could cross it without calling myself a different man. You asked whether I blame you. I did. For a long time. I needed to. If you were the cause, I was the reaction. Soldiers like that arrangement. An order comes. A response follows. The line is clear. There was no order at Whiterun. You were not in Arcadia shop. You were not beside the 3 cure disease potions. You were not holding my hand away from them. You were not at the hunter's bedroll when I fed. You were not at the watchpost when I cast soul trap. You were at the ritual. You told me to stay. I ran. There. That is as far as I can take the explanation without pretending it is a defense. You asked what I want now. That question is harder than the rest. Falion still has the cracked black soul gem you told me. He believes he can transfer the soul into another vessel or prepare a new ritual if the binding holds long enough. Soreen believes the crack can be stabilized for transport. Gunmar believes you should put a hammer through my chest and save everyone the trouble. Durak agrees with Gunmar more loudly. Kalan has not told me what he thinks. You want to know whether I want the cure? Yes. I hate that answer. I still want it. I want to stand in sunlight without burning. I want food, sleep, age, a grave instead of ash. I want to hear a heartbeat and think only that the person is alive. I also know the cure does not touch Ostergrave. It does not return the courier to the road. It does not unmake the old man's terror in that fishing hut. You told me this was not a trial, and I keep giving you evidence anyway. Old habit. You asked whether I would run if Falion came here and the chains came off for the ritual. I do not know. That is the only answer I trust. I told you yes before because yes made me sound dangerous. I told Selan no because no made me sound ready. Both were performances. I do not know. You have been sitting across from me for 4 hours. The light under the shutter has moved from the left side of the floor to the right. Morning is nearly gone. Soreen has come to the door twice. Gunmar once. Selan has been outside the whole time. I can hear his boots when he shifts. You asked one last question. When did I become the thing the Dawnguard hunted? I could give you the courier. That is the obvious answer. I killed an innocent man and put his soul in a gem so I could save myself. I could give you the first ritual. I chose vampire strength over surrender. I could give you Ostar. I killed one of our own. None of those dates fit cleanly. The hunt began before I understood the target. No. That is too neat again. Here is what I know. At Broken Fang Cave, Kalan asked whether the bite broke skin. I had 6 words available. I could have used 3. Yes, it did. I used the other 6. You have risen from the chair now. You have not given me a sentence. You have not promised the cure. You have not promised death. You have only crossed the room and put one hand on the iron lever beside the wall. Above me the shutter begins to open.